Hello, I'm Linda Hong, Assistant Podcast Editor for the Straits Times. In this episode of In Your Opinion, we'll talk about age, sleep, stress, and everything else in longevity science. To discuss this, I'm joined by a man who's Singapore's version of Bryan Johnson, the American biohacker who went viral for his Don't Die movement. Professor Dean Ho, Director, Institute for Digital Medicine at NUS Yong School of Medicine. Welcome to the show, Prof.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Prof, you turned your own body into a clinical trial when you put yourself in a study called Delta around 2 years ago. So could you tell us what exactly is Delta?
For the Delta study, we believe that everybody has a Delta. It is a way for people to engage with their own health data in a more visual way. When we look at how we engage with our health data now, and this is a global approach, our health is typically viewed as a snapshot. We go in for blood work once a year, and the doctor usually tells us maybe to eat a little bit better, sleep a little bit more, exercise a little bit more, and I'll see you 365 days later. I want to emphasize that the annual health checkup is important. It is indeed important because it does give us a population level and scaled approach for everybody to have insights they need to check in with their health. But some things we've seen over the past many years is that there's added depth to what our biology looks like, how our biology responds to stress, how it responds to changes in our sleep patterns, etc. And if we can illuminate that a little bit better, then we can advance beyond insight and move into trajectory. But if we acquire our data in a more careful manner, in a more calibrated way, we can even move beyond trajectory to reveal capability. I think that's what we want to really know, to optimize, to truly optimize how we either fortify our health if we're healthy, and to even manage some of the most serious diseases of our time if someone's a patient.
What were your main takeaways that you took from the study, and which one surprised you?
I think the most surprising part of the study was watching my biology adapt and change over time. What do I mean by that? When we look at ourselves via snapshot, one of the questions I have is what version of ourselves showed up for that snapshot? And I think no matter where we are in the world, we largely don't know. If 10 years ago when I had my blood work done, I don't know if at the time I was particularly healthy or not. Did I spend months before that preparing for the blood work? Did I just get back from holiday where I enjoyed everything under the sun? I don't really remember. And when I think about my biology and what we did in Delta, we drew upon experience that we've had for over 10 years calibrating people. What does that mean? In Delta, I studied a baseline version of my biology, which is I fasted overnight, just a usual overnight fast before we do blood work, to look at some of my markers. Then I stressed my system. The stress for me was a 48-hour water fast, which I'll emphasize people don't have to do this. They don't have to do it. They should not copy what I did, but it's something that I've been doing for a while. So that was a fast and a stress that I was able to undertake. So now I've got a baseline Dean on Monday. I've got a stressed Dean on Wednesday. That's the fasted Dean. And then after taking my Wednesday blood draw, I refed. I started consuming food again. And then on Friday, I had the third version of Dean, which is a recovering Dean. So I've got baseline, stressed, and recovering. 3 different versions of Dean. And I looked at these markers according to each version of me. And that curve is what showed the capability of my biology in coping with stress. That is resilience visualized. And so what happened then was I had a stress response. My markers shot up when I was stressed, and they came back down when I recovered. Then I took some time, reran the same cycle, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that stress response wasn't there anymore. Then I took some time and I reran the cycle, and the stress response was not only not there, the overall markers were even better on the third time. So you see this adaptation over time that goes beyond longitudinal. I think longitudinal, where we keep sampling ourselves over time, gives us important information. But collecting nonstop data of ourselves over time off of one version of ourselves, I think we can do more than that. And when I say do more, I don't mean measure more. I actually mean let's poke our biology a little bit. Let's see how it responds to this duration of fast or this intensity of exercise, a lighter intensity, a more intense version. So that way we can look at resilience in real life. That's when our capability is revealed.
So what were some of the findings that surprised you?
My biology changed. I could see it change before my eyes. I could see my body reduce its stress response in time according to different versions of me. There's a lot of discussion right now about resilience. By definition, resilience cannot be claimed with one data point. Resilience requires a baseline. Resilience requires a stress. Resilience requires insight into how we respond to that stress. The markers that we looked at, one of them was homocysteine. That marker is not new. The marker was very popular at one point. But I think we were unique in looking at it the way we looked at it, which was not merely more homocysteine measurements, but homocysteine related to different versions of me. And when we could see the pattern of stress show up, see it reduce, see it disappear, seeing that happen with me was very illuminating.
But what about, say, for instance, is there a technology to this aspect of the study?
Great point. I think that the technology side, certainly we can glean from wearables that can play a role in giving us information about our vitals alongside the change in our stress response. But part of this includes taking the analysis of those patterns and incorporating that analysis into larger calculations of things like biological age, right? Biological age, which is increasingly popular, which tells us how we are functioning relative to people from different age categories. They're still largely based on snapshots. Those snapshots are getting more detailed, though. Maybe somebody can look at cholesterol, look at liver function, kidney function, heart function, brain function, genetic information as well. We can increase the complexity of that snapshot to give us more insight, which is indeed useful. But what if you can integrate functionality into that assessment? Because I think both are valuable. I think that an insight into the state of our biology is great, and you can do that at scale by studying all kinds of markers at one time point. But I think it's also important to understand function. And by building that into biological age estimation, it could sharpen the spear of that insight.
But this study where you did, which is about eating how many calories a day, fasting, it sounds very much like Bryan Johnson's regimen of he does about 1,977 vegan calories a day. He takes over 100 supplements. He sleeps by 8:30 p.m. And he also does skin laser, and there's also continuous bodily measurements, right? So could you maybe just explain how does this project, how does Delta Study differ from Project Blueprint?
Sure. I think the first thing I'll mention is that we have a substantial body of work that looks at personalization of exercise, personalization of supplementation, personalization even of cancer drug administration and dosing to patients, actual patients in Singapore. Our overarching finding from the medical research that we do aligns with Delta, which is we know that we are all different from each other. I think we can all agree on that. But we are different from ourselves over time. What's best for me today will change dynamically. Precision is dynamic. Personalization is dynamic. Optimums are dynamic. They cannot be static. The differentiator here is we don't take a fixed regimen and measure our response continuously over time. I am not the most measured person on the planet. And being the most measured was not the foundation of Delta. It was to acquire the right data that represented different versions of me so that I could see my dynamics in motion. If you can see your dynamics in motion, then you know how to best intervene to address what you want to address. For me, it could be changing my fasting dose. We're actually doing this for this patient. And when that happens, when we study the capability of their biology and lock in on a better dose, you have a person who's now responding to a drug that we thought they couldn't respond to. We are acquiring back not only more life, but high quality life. That is optimization. And so back to regimens and measurement, I would say one core differentiator is there is no Delta regimen. People will often think, and they often say this to me, Dean, there is no way I can do what you do. And I tell people, every single one of us has a Delta. Every single one of us. Every one of us in the room, everybody outside this room has a Delta, which is a reflection of what their metabolism, for example, is capable of. How they avail that Delta can be done on our own terms. I started my process by fasting a little bit. Okay, I used to fast 12 hours. Some people can sleep 12 hours a night. I wish I could sleep that much, and that's a fast already. And I eventually ramped it up from 12 to 14 to 16. I made very small adjustments to get to a point where I felt like I was really understanding how my metabolism switches between sugar and fat, this concept of ketosis. When I saw my Delta, I was a changed person. I was totally a changed person when I saw how much control I had over my biology. The rest of what I do, the moving the sleep earlier, moving my caffeine earlier in the day, how I eat, those were organic adjustments I made over the course of me wanting to fortify my Delta, to sustain my Delta. And by the way, my regimen includes pizza. I'm going to have pizza this weekend. I'm looking forward to it. It includes ice cream cones.
Wow.
It includes burgers. I just know what my limits are at this point to keep the Delta fortified. And I will tell people that say, Dean, you've got some sort of superhuman level of discipline. Everybody at this point has seen my before photo.
Yes.
If my discipline was superhuman, that photo wouldn't be there. The change was never about becoming the after. It was seeing the Delta and then kind of me making adjustments to ways that worked for me that resulted in the after. I never even knew the after existed. My son sent me the photo and said, hey, Dad, check this out. I never even knew. I didn't even know I had those photos. I forgot about them. And so the Delta for us leads us to a core differentiator, which is data. We often think of data as the output, as something that helps us observe. I think data is the intervention. If you can see your data move in front of you on your own terms, you or anybody may want to create their own way of sustaining it. And so I'm not the most measured. I am by for sure not fixed on one regimen. I don't have a specific Delta diet. Things are dynamic. They change over time. I will add, Bryan, I've met him before. He's a super nice person. We've had illuminating, insightful discussions, and I was grateful that I was able to have a chance to speak with him.
Did any of the discussion influence how both of you were doing your individual regimens?
I don't know if I've influenced him. I will say that his approach to sleep, and to each their own. I think not everybody has to sleep at 8 or 8:30 or 9, but his dedication to sleep is inspiring. I think that he has helped bring the longevity and health span discussion to a lot of people out there who normally wouldn't have the chance to think about this. And I will say, I used to sleep at 2 a.m. I used to view Netflix and watching movies, which I still watch, but I used to think about this at 2 a.m. as my way of relaxing, decompressing. I have since viewed sleep as a better way of decompressing. I still watch my movies. I just watch them at another time, not at 2. And having my discussions with him helped drive that. But the way we look at data, the way we collect data probably differs, because we, thanks to our amazing team at WisDM, at N1, at biomedical engineering, the way we collect data is different because we look at capability versus just more data points over time.
And what about the public reaction to what you did? The moment you posted a biological age of 32, the Internet Peanut Gallery immediately started asking what you take. So some people assume you take testosterone replacement, HGH, or a mountain of supplements. Could you tell us, what are you actually taking and what role do drugs play in this?
Happy to. As also disclosed in the paper, I do not take any form of prescription anything, not even prescription allergy meds. No testosterone, no HGH, nothing. In terms of supplements, though, I do. And that's actually also disclosed in the paper. Actually, we have the full list disclosed, and these are pretty standard, evidence-backed. Omega-3, vitamin D, vitamin K2 to, calcium balance, of course, vitamin B complex. Nothing unusual. Things we can get over the counter that are backed by evidence, and nothing hyper extensive. It's still maybe more than what the general public takes, but I think that some of the takeaways I get right now at this stage is that the before and after photo is still the lead on the discussion. Some have said I look older. I will say when we go from 2021 to 2024, I am older. Okay, I am older, but I will say that biological age is easily interpreted visually, but it's actually technically interpreted functionally. And so I am actually chronologically older over those years, but the way that my metabolism is functioning now is functioning, I emphasize, is probably better than the general mid-40s to 50s population because of what we were able to see in terms of how quickly I could switch between sugar and fat, etc. And I'll say no prescription medicines played a role in this. And once I think the community gets to the paper, I want to really emphasize that this paper was ethics board approved, and it's through peer review where questions come up. Have you had alcohol during the course of the study? Which was no. What prescription medicines are you taking? Were there illnesses during this period of time? that's the part of peer review. This is the part of disclosure that is critical to have research like this published. And maybe I'm blessed with good genetics from my family, so I got to thank my family for preserving muscle mass, but very clearly none on the prescription, but yes to supplements.
And you specifically chose to do this study on yourself, and you're getting similar flack that Bryan Johnson gets. And critics say a sample size of 1 don't allow you to draw a general conclusion, even in the scientific community, as we earlier discussed. So as a scientist yourself, what do you reckon with all this? And can we extrapolate your study to the general population?
That's a great question. N equals to 1 is actually defined very differently across communities. One example of N equals to 1 is I'm going to try some stuff. I'm going to try a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to measure response, and then I'm going to report my findings. For our team, N equals 1 means something very different. N equals 1, for us, we actually have an institute. I direct an institute called N1. We build workflows, frameworks that allow us to systematically, I'm going to emphasize, systematically calibrate people under a very generalizable framework. My numbers, my biomarkers, totally should not be used to make claims to address anybody else's health. But our N equals to 1 frameworks are robust because we use only a person's own data to calibrate only their own treatment strategy, to guide only their own care dynamically.
That's for the Delta study.
That's actually not only for Delta,
right,
but for every study we've ever run.
Including the oncology that you were talking about, the dosing as well.
Exactly.
That was what you were doing. Okay.
And that's established over multiple peer-reviewed papers, including N equals to 1 cohorts, where everybody is calibrated in a multi-patient study. And so for us, Delta is actually not that new for us. We basically took a framework of calibrating individuals to treat that person even at multi-patient level. And I'm not on any medication. So what did we do? We calibrated my dose of fasting instead. And there's a reason for this. Why just me? When we first did our work in liver transplant, our very first human study was for transplant patients, and we dosed their immunosuppression to help prevent rejection of their organ. We thought that now that we've proven this, we've peer-reviewed it, and it was a small cohort, but a cohort, we can then move on to another disease indication, and it took time for us to then socialize this with a different medical discipline. After we did oncology, we expanded to more oncology. Each segment, we do find ourselves sometimes having to re-socialize, re-explain what we do. I thought that with our success in helping patients get better, helping healthy stay healthy would be an easier discussion or a lower bar. Not necessarily. But by the way, I'll say we've met with a lot of people in the preventive health space, clinical community that have been very supportive. I found that if I wanted to do this N equals to 1, I needed to be systematic. I needed to do repeats. I needed to do controls. And when I say repeats, it's repeat the same condition multiple times. Do a control, which is 3 meals a day for me, unfasted, whatnot, multiple times. So I think that N equals to 1, when viewed as anecdotal, as a one-off, without a system, without a framework, without a workflow in place, can be challenging to accept even when the disclosures are made of how that study was designed. But in our case, for those who are unfamiliar, we file ethics board approvals. There are experts who review our plans for the study. They assess risk. They assess robustness. They assess, does this contribute to knowledge? Is it safe? All of the above. They check in. There's oversight. And I want to add that one of the major lessons of Delta that we've also seen with all our patients is that the most important data set is you. It's me. It's each person. Because I ask this question to people all the time. If I could get just a couple more blood draws of this patient under slightly different doses, just a couple more, maybe two blood draws, 2 different doses, and that added level of insight was the difference between life and death for that patient, would we want that data? And we've answered that question. We've had patients say, yes, I am willing to consent, informed consent into that trial. And now we have people who didn't respond before, and now they're responding at lower dose. And if we flip that to, you're healthy right now, it's very easy to become unhealthy. Healthy people are very efficient at becoming unhealthy. When I say easy, I don't mean it's going to happen overnight. I mean, that's the trend that the world typically moves in. And by looking at a couple versions of you, I could help you understand how your biology is really functioning. And for some people, definitely not all, that insight helps you take care of your biology a little bit more because I'm showing you what it's doing. Is it worth it? And not everybody will do it. And you don't have to fast 48 hours to do it. Can just a couple extra data points systematically, repeatably giving you insight into your health help you show up for your health a little bit longer? That's delta. That's a different N equals 1. Only your own data, managing only your own care dynamically and systematically.
So Delta actually attempts to build a digital twin of yourself and compare it when you stress test it, which is what you did, right?
Digital twins, popular term, and different people have different thoughts of what a digital twin looks like. Some people think it's a super futuristic version of our face or our whole physiology. And there are people doing that work. For us, our digital twin, candidly, is more boring. It is a curve. It is a curve that relates doses of different things that result in an output or an endpoint or result that is optimal for them at that point in time. Remember, optimums change over time. And it's a curve that we get without needing anybody else's data. As I mentioned, N equals 1, only your own data for only your own care dynamically. How do we do it? If somebody walks in the door with cancer, if somebody walks in the door healthy, but they want to fortify their health, I have no data on this person. So I calibrate them. I let them see a low dose of fasting, a middle dose of fasting, a higher dose of fasting, a lower intensity treadmill run, middle intensity, high intensity, which by the way, we already do for our stress testing for the heart. And when I perturb, right? Perturb as in let people see different versions of that training. That's when I reveal capability visually. It's a curve. That's our digital twin. And that twin changes over time. From the initial calibration, we say, look, next week, maybe you can lower the intensity a little bit, and that will help support continued improvement in your performance. Maybe next week you can up it a little bit, decrease a little bit, and that curve will evolve alongside the person. That's the twin for us. It sadly doesn't look as cool as like a science fiction version of ourselves, 3D hologram. It's a 3D curve sometimes, so that could look pretty cool, but that's what the twin means for us. It's actionable. We actually do treat people with these curves.
Like a control to compare
Exactly.
and contrast. Okay.
And we can be our own control too. That's another aspect of N equals 1 if we do it systematically. What is our baseline? How are we functioning today? Once we start poking or perturbing the system, how does our capability change?
And speaking of static snapshots, you say that, annual health screenings are static snapshots, which is how Singapore's healthcare system evaluates our health. In your opinion, what do you think needs to fundamentally change about our healthcare system with regards to static snapshots over the next decade, perhaps?
I think things we can think about when evaluating if there's an opportunity to maybe sharpen the tools that allow us to understand function. That's why we do studies like Delta, to see, A, is there even any insight there that matters? And with that insight, can this help people change behavior? At the end of the day, it's all about behavior. And I tell people all the time, human behavior is more powerful than the most powerful medicines on the planet. And I think on a global level, the way that we engage with our data annually is a PDF with some blood marker levels and some reference values of what's normal. We still need that. I tend to think smaller. If we think about small steps forward, we send patients out annually, and this is when I say we, I mean the whole world, with a to-do list. They get their PDF. They're told to eat healthier. Here's some examples of how you can eat healthier. Exercise more. Here's some examples of how you can exercise. Sleep longer. This is some ways you can try this. Come in 365 days later. I'll see you next year. And this is all correct. I want to emphasize, we're not here to prove anybody wrong. We're not here to disrupt the system. This is all correct. This has changed humankind. This has helped people. I think that if we can give people a little bit more to steward them into that change, because behavior change is hard. We need to make and find ways to make engaging with our health, viewing our health, protecting our health, fun. I'm going to say, to be fair, illness and medical care maybe it's harder to make fun when someone is sick. But for people who are healthy, if protecting our health is not fun and doom scrolling is more fun than protecting our health, then our health is going to decrease. And that's why our team, before we put people on paths to dig into their functionality of their data, we actually work with industrial designers. We work with animators. We've actually worked with people who did film, computer graphics, to simply take fairly mundane data and make it into something more visually interesting. That's it. No Delta yet. How can we just give someone an easier stepping stone into understanding their health, thinking that they maybe want to make a move to take care of their health? Because before people do a Delta, if you show up for your biology has a higher chance of showing up for you. And giving somebody an easier assist to do that, we believe in that too. And so nothing wrong with annual health checkups. In fact, they are critical. Starting looking at ways to improve the consumption of that information, we at least need to get people showing up to do that first before we put them into a Delta study.
Interesting. And you yourself also ventured into commercializing longevity science. What do you say to people who think that you're profiting off such studies that you're doing? Is there a conflict of interest here?
This is an important question, and thanks for asking this. I'm going to start off by saying that disclosure matters. When we publish, when we do our ethics protocols, when we do informed consent, it is of the utmost importance to disclose affiliations. And the reason for that is it lets the people who participate in the study, who regulate the study, know what other interests a person has in the outcomes of this work. So when the population kind of advances into looking at our paper, I have disclosures in there. And these are disclosures that are in the paper, and they're also filed with our respective employers. So disclosure matters. Then let's move to the science in the innovation. Whenever you have a new field or an emerging field that is gaining traction, a lot of the disciplines have been around for many, many years, decades, even longer, by the way. But now that you have this convergence of technology, AI, longevity, biohacking, health span, the buzz is here. The science matters. And this is where disclosure matters even more, so that when people produce evidence, you can consume that evidence in context, knowing what else this person represents along the way. But let's start even earlier. When we think about innovation, some funding is needed to drive innovation. Innovation in longevity, health span improvement, cancer care, infectious diseases. As that innovation gets proven by peer review papers, by continued development, and it moves into validation, which is by clinical trials, at some point, the goal is to help people. We want to help people at scale. And at that point, with that as the foundation, then the science has got to be there. If you're going to help people, the science has got to be there. To steward that innovation forward, that the who bears the cost, how that is further carried out into the public, there's eventually a transition. If there is value to the solution and it's science-backed, the evidence is there, that value can then be picked up sometimes by public sector, by public insurance, by private insurance, and in some cases by the consumer, if something is that important. If a drug can save a life, typically somebody will pay for it. It will be a combination of out-of-pocket plus private insurance plus public insurance, et cetera. But to steward that whole process is what the innovation process is. And that's a kind of a global framework that exists. But at the heart of it, disclosure matters. And when newer or new fields emerge, it's important to make sure that the science is validated. It's validated. There's ethics approvals where needed. There is clinical validation that is peer reviewed. And that this is also coupled with people being forthcoming of what not only their role in the study was, but what their roles might be beyond the study and the validation.
Let's talk about something more fun, back to the study and what you did. It sounds like your routine is very intense. You sleep at 9:15. You have structured workouts and you do extreme fasting, the water fasting as well that you've mentioned. So for the average working person, that level of control is quite challenging, especially we have to juggle everything. What's the one thing from the study that you think you can recommend that, or say that what's the one thing from your study that is actually worth doing?
Well, first I'll say that, and we talk about my regimen in the paper, and it is intense. I think by any standard, it's intense. And some of my biggest critics are easy to find. My dad and my mom definitely don't spare me when it comes to asking me, like, how are you doing this? Okay, how do you sustain this? But I will say that Delta never started that way. When I started fasting, it was 12 hours. Then eventually I ramped it up. I used to sleep at 2. I moved it earlier. I used to eat a lot of fast food. I used to drink a lot of iced lemon tea. I love iced lemon tea.
Sugared iced lemon tea?
Very sugared iced lemon tea. But I think the narrative on this is Dean Ho. This guy exercised and he cut sugar. Before and after photo. Big surprise. Eat healthier, get healthier. And yeah, it is pretty obvious. But for me, it was seeing my data that changed me. Remember, if I had that much discipline built in, there would be no before. I started small. Back to your question. I started small. And one of the things I did was I started sleeping 15 minutes earlier. Okay, that alone, by the way, is not going to completely transform your health, but could I trade 15 minutes of doom scrolling back for 15 minutes of rest? And eventually I started seeing my resting heart rate improve. That was my return. Removing sugar from my coffee, which, by the way, sounds trivial. It's not.
It's not.
It's very hard. It took me weeks. I remember thinking like, hey, maybe I'll just put a little bit in, I'm about 4 weeks into it. Maybe I'll just add a little bit more. And I was like, if I add a little bit more sugar, I'm going right back to the beginning. And then after the sugar was sustainably removed, I removed the milk. Also hard. But for me now, it's Kopi O Kosong, right? That's me. And I was telling colleagues, I'm so much about Kopi O Kosong that it's actually published in one of my previous papers. The very first paper where I was the test subject, we proudly had that term in the paper because that study was enabled by this ecosystem. It was run in Singapore, and we should represent locally what the terms are that enabled my health to improve. Small steps. And we know small steps also can help. That's not new. But if you can pair small steps with feedback, Delta for me, the regimen for me was organically derived by me. And that's very different than me telling somebody, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. Because that's what we typically do now. We say, follow my protocol and you'll transform. But we know we're different from each other. We all have different obligations, responsibilities. Some people can't sleep at 9:15 at night. Some people have to sleep in shifts. But I think organically developing a way that works for us can work. And I'll tell you, I have taken a lot of grab rides in the last 8 years I've been here, and I've been visiting Singapore since way before that. And probably one of my greatest privileges of being here is all the amazing discussions I've had with grab drivers about what their life is like and understanding what it's like to live their schedules, to live their routine, to understand what they go through. They move the country. And we knew this. We knew we're all different from each other, but a big part of what we do, we mentioned, is behavior, and understanding what people go through is a huge part of that. That's why technology alone can't transform health or healthcare. Delta has no regimen. What I do was born from the little adjustments I made to keep my Delta fortified. And everybody else out there has their own way that's best for them. We are our own most valuable data set.
How long do you think you extended your life with the Delta study? Have you stopped doing what you've been doing, the structured regimen yet?
I don't know how long I've extended my life. I will say wrinkles did show up, over the course of this study. So to those who have enjoyed the news that's come out, I agree with them. Delta was not built to disappear wrinkles. The time and the years do go by. I do think that my metabolism, and I define metabolism as the efficiency, the functionality of how we switch between sugar and fat usage, which we measure, which we show very clearly in this paper, even very acutely within a small window of time and repeatedly. I do think my metabolism functions better than a general mid-40s to 50-year-old. How quickly it switches, and there's literature on this. And I think that when we look at evidence and how a sustained, well-functioning metabolism can help protect us against certain downstream disorders, I do think fortifying has happened. Fortifying to a specific number, I don't know. I think that biological age is an insight. I think we can sharpen that insight by building functionality into the biological age, not just more snapshots or more detailed snapshots. Also helpful, but I think we're looking at this in a little bit of a different way. I do think maybe I've at least protected myself longer. But we'll see how that goes. I still do follow more or less everything that Delta has become for me. But I will say that you can still live and enjoy life with Delta. I prioritize time with my family intensely and time with friends. And when I hang out with my family and when I hang out with my friends, the rules are to enjoy life.
So I would assume that your biological age would increase quickly if you stopped what you had been doing and go back to drinking sugared lemon tea?
Probably. I think it would certainly start reverting back. I think whatever I fortified maybe will give me a little bit of a delay, but I will say that if I start to perturb my system with things that maybe don't fortify, but maybe do the opposite of fortify, which is to maybe consume a lot more sugar, to consume a lot more fried foods, to drink caffeine maybe a little bit too late in the day, I probably will be pushing back against the fortification, if you will. And for those, who are interested, the reason I do this is I firmly believe that N equals to 1 when done right, when done systematically, when done repeatably, can impact a lot more than that one person. That it can really, hopefully, help those around them. Those who know me know that my wife has overcome profound medical challenge, and my kids themselves have been through a lot. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, the last time I was sitting in this room, my wife was re-diagnosed that morning with a spine tumor. And for me, N equals to 1, and this is just for me, for me, N equals to 1 is a chance for me to give my kids a chance to maybe live a little bit better. I don't instill any aspects of Delta on my kids, but behavioral modeling is well established. And I just want to give them something maybe to look at in terms of showing up for our health. Same for my wife. She's a real inspiration, and if I can help my family stay healthier, and if I can help them stay healthier, they will have helped me stay healthier. It goes both directions. If I can help my friends show up for their health, worth it. Colleagues, the same. And I've gotten some outreach from the community that is inspiring for me. It's inspiring for me to see the excitement that the community has to show up for their own health. And so N equals to 1, you got to prove the evidence out. The N equals to 1's got to be defined a certain way, but I think that N equals to 1 can impact a lot more people than we think.
Could you explain quickly what is the rationale or the concept behind N equals to 1? Because N equals to 1 seems like it's a sample size of 1, but you're also, I assume in our chats, you were also talking about how it's individualized sort of health intervention.
N equals 1 literally means the number equals 1.
Yes.
Right? But I think that, and we actually do this all the time. We have large numbers of people recruited into an N equals to 1 trial, which means each person's dosing will change according to only their own data, which means you can do N equals to 1 studies with more than one person. It's just being mindful that each person's journey will be unique. I think we can all agree that we want medicine. So when we're helping patients get better, we want it to be personalized. We want it to be precise. Singapore is best in the world for championing this and to driving these important studies. And so if we can agree on that, then N equals to 1 really is another way of driving personalization because it's dynamic. There's different ways to drive personalization. You can take large amounts of population information so that something is trained on very good levels of knowledge, and then applying that population information to an individual. That can add really important insight already. But we're hoping to sharpen that even more, which is only your own data to drive only your own care. To do that, we had to, and we did develop ways to get that information as quickly as possible. And I want to emphasize, we are not doing this in conflict with other methods. We actually collaborate with people who use genomics to pick the right medicines. After you pick the right medicine, how do you dose it? How do you change the dose? That puts us together into one team. After we do fasting dose optimization, exercise dose optimization, there are people who look at genetic information to help people understand maybe what types of exercise are more suitable for them. We can help dose that and adjust those doses over time. N equals to 1, by our definition, is rigorous. There's specific protocols we use that are generic to calibrate. When I say protocols, I don't mean we're going to make everybody do the exact same exercise because this one guy did that exercise. It is a method of collecting the data that allows us to tell this person today, this is going to be the best dose for you. As we update that data with just your data, we might say, by the way, maybe tomorrow we'll increase it a little bit, we'll decrease it a little bit. That's N equals to 1 for us. And it's scalable. We've actually scaled elements of it in oncology already worldwide. And so we're not fazed by that. And again, we're not here to prove people wrong. I think spending a career trying to prove people wrong is not that interesting for us. I think it's not that gratifying when it comes to ecosystem building. We did what we did. We're able to do what we do because of the people around us that made it possible. So N equals to 1 for us means many things. We're going to help this person with only their own data. And in the case of health, when one person helps themselves, they maybe help other people around them. But N equals to 1 was enabled by N equals 1,000, right? The people around us that made this possible. That's why we're so passionate about it. Everybody is their own most important data set. If we get a little bit more data from this person, in some cases, we save a life. And in other cases, we help a person take care of their health and understand how to do it.
And intervention using data, understanding data, requires us to not eat certain foods in order for us to maintain our health. And you having fasted for 20 hours a day and you cut out all the fun foods for 2 years, it sounds miserable to a lot of Singaporeans and to a lot of people. And Singaporeans love food. So what's the point of extending your life, in your opinion, if you severely restrict your quality of life today just so that you can extend your life?
Great question. So one thing I'll say is Delta was an exercise in personalization, to really understand personalization based upon understanding the capability of our biology. Delta was never meant to be punishment. And my favorite foods are chicken rice, and my son and I know this. My son and I just went on a father-son holiday to Penang. We did about 5 chendals per person over 2.5 days.
Wow.
And my metabolism's still pretty good right now. And so when we think about what Delta is, for me, it really is about living, but in balance with also taking care of ourselves. Balance matters. When people look at the foods that I ate sushi with rice. I think there's a misconception that I've said goodbye to carbs forever. I actually eat a fair amount of carbs. I do need to power the workouts that I do. I enjoy carbs. Never met a pizza I didn't like. Okay, never met a pizza I didn't like. My friends know this. And I just make sure that when I am able to take a peek into what my metabolism's doing, that I know that I can balance properly with the foods that I like while looking out for myself too. I will say that I also love sourdough bread, and in Singapore we have like so many good places that make sourdough bread. I love the rice in chicken rice. I maybe don't eat excessive amounts of the rice, but I enjoy it. You need it. Love bak kut teh, which is, by the way, it works well for me with getting my protein in. I've had plenty along the journey. And I've actually used some food as some opportunities to see how my metabolism responds into eating the stuff that I like as well. resilience needs a stress. Resilience needs that type of input. Understanding how our body adapts over time, you got to put something into the system that shows you if it's able to respond. And it's even better when whatever we put into the system is a chicken rice, or in my case, 3 chicken rices. So we were able to enjoy foods, and we also were able to find balance as well, which, by the way, let me enjoy the foods even more. And I think that part is also something that I think we want to better communicate. Deprivation makes sustainability very hard. If we have to say goodbye to the things that we love that count as living for us, that's never what Delta was about. And my Chendol outing is proof of that. I think there are Chendol vendors in Penang that instantaneously recognize me now, given the amount of repeat business I gave them in the span of 1 to 2 days, 2.5 day trip total. And that Chendol did not include the Chendol I had in Singapore right when I got back, because I needed more Chendol. I just don't have it every day. Right? I don't have it every single week, but I didn't take my son to the Singapore Chendol location. So one can count on me being there pretty soon with my son.
Thank you very much, Prof. It's very interesting to hear how you talk about how data has an intervention in behavioral science, especially for health and preventative health. Thanks, Prof.
Thank you for having me.
And you're listening to In Your Opinion, a podcast by the Straits Times. You can find links to other podcasts, opinion columns, and stories in our show notes. This episode is edited by Hadil Rahim. And I'm Linda Hong, signing off.